Hello, my name is Nancy Shore, and I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Community Engagement for Ann Arbor Public Schools. And I want to welcome you to this orientation for any AAPS volunteer. We're really excited to have you, and this orientation is going to help walk you through all the things you need to know in order to volunteer at AAPS. So let's get started. First, I want to welcome you, as I said, as a volunteer with Ann Arbor Public Schools. It's so wonderful that you have made this commitment to volunteering with us, and I'm really excited to have you here today. So, what are we going to talk about today? So, first, we're going to give you a little information about Ann Arbor Public Schools. You can get to know us if you've never experienced or been part of Ann Arbor Public Schools before. Talk a little bit about your role as a volunteer, some information about how you can recognize and report abuse if it's needed, how you can have success for the person that you are matched with as a volunteer, how you can prepare to volunteer at our schools, some behavior strategies and hints and tips to work with students. And then finally, we'll send you out the door with some next steps for how you can start volunteering. So first, I want to talk a little bit about Ann Arbor Public Schools, both who I am and who we are in our department, and anything else about Ann Arbor Public Schools. So first of all, our community division, which is the Strategic Partnerships Office, is made up of two people. Jen Myers is the Community Division Office Professional, so you may be seeing some emails from her. And again, I'm Nancy Shore, and we are here to help welcome you to all of our schools. But of course, once you get matched with the school and you work with a particular school contact, that's going to be your primary contact. But think of us as your concierge service. We are here to get you where you need to go. And of course, if you have questions along the way, we're happy to answer them. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about Ann Arbor Public Schools because I think it's important to understand what our schools are like and our population is like when you think about volunteering with us. So first of all, we have about 17,000 students at our schools, and of those students, about 1 in 8 have a special needs or an IEP, which is an individualized education plan. 1 in 4 are from homes impacted by poverty, and 1 in 10 are speaking an language other than English at home. So, when you look at this information, what might jump out at you or surprise you? And what do you think these statistics say about Ann Arbor Public Schools? Well, I know one of the things that people are often surprised about is how many students we have that are impacted by poverty at our schools, which is about 1 in 4. And why that's surprising is that we do think of Ann Arbor as a relatively affluent community, but the reality is we do have a lot of diversity in terms of economics with our students. So in a classroom, you may have a student whose parent is a professor at the University of Michigan. And then you also have a parent, might have a student that has a parent who works in the janitorial services at Michigan Medicine. So there is that much difference. And so it's just something to be aware of because that also means that all of our students are not coming in with the same experiences. And so you want to really make sure that you're aware of the experiences of that particular student. Also interesting is the number of students we have that are English language learners or multilingual learners. It is a growing, increasing population. We see more every year, including students that have been refugees from other countries. And so that's just an interesting statistic to think about, especially if you are bilingual, that might serve you well when you're volunteering at our schools. And then something else to keep in mind is that many of our classrooms have between 25 and 30 students. So it's very likely that you're going to have a student from all of these different categories in your classroom. So again, it's something to be in mind, keep in mind as you're thinking about our schools. And then one thing I did want to also note is that not all of our schools are the same and have the same makeup. Some of our schools have more students who are English language learners. Some of our schools have more students from homes impacted by poverty. And so really understand and get to know the school that you're going to volunteer at so that you can really serve them as best as possible. So, speaking of learning more about your school and about Ann Arbor Public Schools, there's many ways that you can do that. First of all, you can go to a2schools.org. That is our main homepage. You've probably already been there if you've applied for volunteering. And you can go on that site and go to the Our Schools section or about APS and find your school. We're also on social media, so you're free to search for us there. And a really great feature we have is we do have a site that has all kinds of great news and videos about different schools. And so that's a great place for you to go to find information about your school or about Ann Arbor Public Schools in particular. So if you want to find out, this is very relevant to all of you. So no matter what the weather is, there are times when our schools are closed, maybe because of a day off, maybe because of a break, maybe because of an inclement weather issue, maybe because of some sort of issue with something at the school. So what do you need to do? So first of all, extremely important. Make sure that you are looking at our calendar page and noting any of the days that we have an early release where kids are being let off early. Make sure that you're looking at any days that we have off and how that might coincide with your volunteering. Also, if there is a snow day or a school closure, you're going to be able to find out about it by going to our social media pages, a2schools.org, and then there's also a closure hotline. And we are also going to do our best to email or send you a text notification through Better Impact so that you can also be notified of that closing. So you're going to be volunteering at a school, and sometimes schools have different types of emergencies. So what do you need to know in the event of emergency? It's actually pretty simple. Obviously, first of all, you want to remain as calm as possible. That's going to help the situation. Help the teacher that you're working with in any way that they need help. We do have signs in all of our classrooms that talk about what to do in the event of an emergency. So that's certainly something that you can be looking at. And of course, please do not post anything on social media until the situation is resolved. We may not know what's really happening, and so we wouldn't want to cause any undue concern or alarm by putting something out there before we really know what the situation is. So those are really some good hits and tips in the event of an emergency. So what are some takeaways you might need to know more about AAPS? First, that we have a very diverse student body, both economically as well as culturally. And that's a really interesting way to think about the students that you're going to be in a classroom with. You're going to see that diversity there. Whenever there may be an emergency at a school, please remain calm. We are going to provide you with links to our volunteer guide, and there will be one here on this slide, and you'll get access to these slides as well. And you want to be checking that for details about remaining calm in an emergency. And of course, make sure that you find out so you're not coming to a school when it's not open. Find out when they're closed by going to our different outlets for that information. Great. So now we're moving on to your role as a volunteer at Ann Arbor Public Schools. And so if you want to think about any one takeaway about your job as a volunteer, it really is to be a positive adult role model. So when you think about what it might mean to be a positive adult role model, what are some things that come to mind to you? Maybe it's being a good listener. Maybe it's being somebody that a person can trust. It's probably showing all of those sort of qualities that you really admire in the adults in your life that you think are very successful. And so that's really how you want to bring yourself to our schools. So behave in a way that would really make others proud and be inspired by your behavior and actions because the kids are looking up to you. And so, one of the great ways for you to be that positive role model and to really help support the students is to get to know them. And there's lots of different ways that you can get to know them. And so, some of the different ways could include obviously understanding what they're interested in. Are they interested in sports? Are they interested in video games, music, movies? What needs may they have? What are some things that they're showing you? We're going to talk a little bit more about that later. What is their culture? So, is this student from a similar background and culture from you? Do they have a very different life experience? It's really important to understand that. What is that student's strength? So, every student has an important strengths that you really want to leverage and maximize when you're volunteering with them. So, what are they? And then finally, and obviously not last, is making sure that you understand that student's name, how to pronounce it correctly, and also, of course, pronouns. You want to make sure that you are really respecting that student and meeting them where they're at. Another great thing that you can do as a AAPS volunteer is model. Now, when I say model, I'm not talking about the fancy catwalk, runway sort of modeling. I'm more talking about showing a student how to be a successful adult. So there may be things that you can do when you get there, show that how to be organized, show how to listen to the teacher. You just want to demonstrate all of those things that are going to let that student know this is what it's like to be a successful adult. And so really think about how you can model for students. And also being part of an adult role model and modeling, it's not about being a kid's best friend. So we're not here to make best friends. Students have their own best friends. You're in a different role. You're more like a camp counselor or a coach. So really think about and put yourself in that position. Another really important thing to keep in mind is that we do have laws that regulate the sharing of students' identifiable information with anybody outside of the classroom. And so you really need to respect that. So what does that mean? So of course, a student is likely going to tell you if they're an oversharer, all kinds of things about who they are, what's going on in their life, what kind of issues they're having at school, and that's totally fine. They can share that with you. The teacher might share some things with you to help you help that student, but you really need to be careful about sharing any of that information in any other places. You obviously don't want to take pictures of students. You don't want to be posting on social media. If you have any sort of assignment that you're supposed to be writing about a student, you're not going to use their name. So just really be careful about what you share because that student has not given consent. And you, of course, wouldn't want anybody sharing personal information about you without them getting permission from you, right? And we also want to make sure that you are, as you're volunteering at our schools, that you are not alone with students. And this is really both for your safety and protection as well as the safety and protection of our students. And it's simply because if something were to happen, and it was just you and that student in that room, that could really be an issue, right? You could maybe even get asked to leave because of something that might have happened. So you always want to be in a situation where there are eyes on you. So you can volunteer if the teacher wants you to be in the hallway or wants you to be in the room with a group of students. That's totally fine. They just never have a student go into a bathroom and you go with them or be behind a closed door where nobody else can see you. So, to wrap this up, what are some key takeaways you need to learn about your role? So, connecting and modeling, you really want to be that connection and build relationship type person with your volunteer, with your student as a volunteer. And you also want to make sure that you're being that positive role model. Make sure that you're respecting the privacy of the students and not share any information about those students outside of the school. And then, of course, please do not be alone with students. We wouldn't want anything to happen and you get blamed for it. So next, we're going to go over something that I hope you never have to deal with, which is recognizing and reporting abuse. And just to understand, so we're all on the same page about what child abuse is, it is non-accidental. It is done to a minor, someone under 18 years of age, and it is done by somebody who is responsible for the child's health or welfare. So that's the overall definition. There are many signs that you may see of child abuse, physical, mental, sexual, or a sign of neglect or maltreatment. And you will be able to, when you see these slides in the volunteer guide, view the slideshow and see a lot more information about indicators just to understand what is not abuse. So if there is something with a kid in terms of they have head lice or there's an issue with how the kid is acting in school, a student may be experiencing homelessness, a sibling might be hurting them. These are all things that you still want to talk to your contact about, but not things that would be considered child abuse. So for those things that are child abuse, what if you saw a red flag or an indicator of child abuse? What would you do? So, what you want to do first is we would rather you not report if possible, simply because you may not know the full extent of the situation or what's going on. We'd rather you tell your contact. And if you need to report it, we're of course fine with that. If you're not happy with the outcome, you are able to do that in this slide. When you get the link to these slides, you'll be able to click on this to report an issue if you need to do that. And of course, you want to keep it confidential outside of the reporting process because we don't want anybody else to know what's happening, especially because you may not really know what the situation is. So, what are the key takeaways for recognizing and reporting abuse? Of course, understanding and knowing the signs, making sure to say something. So again, you want to, anytime you see something that may be potential child abuse, please tell your contact, but then make sure that it is confidential. Do not share with anybody else outside of those who need to know. Okay, great. We're moving right along here. Now we are going on to how you can be successful with your AAPS contact. So it is just as important for you to develop a relationship with that teacher that you're going to be matched with when you volunteer as it is with the students. So what are some things that you can think about? So I am not an athletic person, but I do know about rowing, and I know about crew, and I know about the role that everybody has when they're on a crew team. So there's always the coxswain, who is the person in the front. And then there's all the rest of the team. And what does that coxswain do? They are the ones that are shouting the orders, being encouraging, making sure that everybody is going along to the same beat, to the same rowing, right? And so you really want to think about yourself as part of that crew team. You want to be running in sync, being in sync with all the rest of the staff members that might be in the room with you, because chances are there's going to be some other adults. And you really want to see that AAPS staff member, the main contact, as your leader, as the person that's going to guide you and help you show what you need to do. At the same time, this model really doesn't make you kind of sit back and slouch. You want to show up, you want to be ready to go, and you want to be part of that team. So really think of yourself as part of the team, but again, think about your AAPS contact as the leader. And so thinking about yourself as part of a team and that AAPS staff person, when we talk to AAPS staff, what do you think they say is the biggest challenge that they have with the volunteers that they serve? What do you think is the hardest thing that they deal with volunteers? So unfortunately, it's communication. So if a volunteer can't make a volunteer shift and they don't say anything, they ghost the teacher, that is just really damaging, not just to the teacher, but of course to all those students who are expecting that teacher to come, to the volunteer to show up. So please, please, please do not get on the dark side of communication. We want you to be a communication Jedi. And what that really means is be proactive with your communication. All you got to do is make sure that that teacher knows if you're going to be there, is or not going to be there, or if there's something happening in your life. Just communicate, and that will make a world of difference with your relationship. A great tool that we're providing to you and your teacher contact is this volunteer educator agreement. This is a Google form that walks you through all the expectations and things that you and that teacher are going to need to know so that you can be on the same page about your volunteering experience. So we highly, highly encourage you to complete that either the first day that you volunteer or pretty soon after. So, what are some key takeaways for how you can set yourself up for success with your AAPS contact? First of all, be part of the team. Join the crew. Be part of that team and follow that leader so that you can be ready and be strong and be all in with your AAPS team there for the students. Of course, make sure that you communicate, you over communicate, you make sure that that teacher knows what's happening, what's going on with your schedule, so that your volunteer contact is not left in the dust, and those students who have been trusting and relying on you don't feel like you're leaving them all behind. And a great tool that you can use is this volunteer educator agreement, which will ensure that you guys are all on the same page. Okay, so you have understood about your role, you know about AAPS, you know a little bit about looking at recognizing and reporting abuse. You've had some ideas of how you can be successful. So now is the exciting part. How do you get ready for your placement at Ann Arbor Public Schools? So a couple things you need to do. It would be great for you before you get to your placement is look at our lovely volunteer guide, check out what we have on a2schools.org, ask your contact if you can do anything to prepare yourself. You're going to be using Better Impact to choose your placement. I'm going to talk more about that in a second, as well as logging hours. You want to complete that volunteer educator agreement when you connect with your AAPS contact, and just be a responsible, positive adult role model to both your students as well as your AAPS contact. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about Better Impact. And since you're viewing this video, it's very likely that you have already used it. You've signed up to volunteer, and that application is run through Better Impact. A couple things to know about Better Impact is that is going to be where if you are somebody who chooses their own placement, you will be choosing your placement. You also can get news and resources at our Better Impact site, both on the main news page as well as the emails that we will send to you. And then if your placement chooses to have you do this, you will log your hours. And so this is a way for them to be able to verify that you have volunteered. So you can get your grade or you can get your credit for volunteering with AAPS. So something really important to know. So when it is time for you to choose your activity, if you are doing that and you're not being placed through your coordinator, you must sign up for every single shift that you are available. And so what does that mean? It means that you're going to see a number of different shifts when you volunteer, all the way from the beginning of your volunteer experience to 2 months later. You want to sign up for every single shift that you're available. And so that's when we build our schedule. It allows us to see, oh, yeah, this person is volunteering today. And that's really helpful. So please, please, please do that. It'll make it really easy for us to know that you are committed. When you are done signing up and you've got your placement, what's going to happen on your first day? Please make sure that you show up early, especially if you've never been there, because you're going to have to find parking. You're going to have to find the main entrance. So please give yourself a little bit more time. Find the main entrance to the school. Every school is going to be locked during the school day. So you're going to want to ring the buzzer, let them know who you are, that you're volunteering and who you're volunteering with. So it'll make it really easy for you to them to understand and welcome you in. And then you want to go into the main office, and that's where you're going to check in. You're going to have your ID with you, and they're going to create a visitor badge. And you're going to be getting any more information you might need to get to your classroom. So how can you prepare for your placement? We've got some great tools for you. We've got a volunteer guide. We also have this lovely mini guide, which is just a 2-page with some of the most relevant information on it. You're going to want to complete the volunteer educator agreement. I know I've said that once, but I'm going to hammer it home. And then finally, please do whatever you need to do to make sure that that first day goes as smoothly as possible. Okay, we are wrapping it up. So one of the other things that you may encounter as you volunteer is students who are showing challenging behaviors or behaviors that you're not sure how to deal with. And so let's talk a little bit about some strategies that you might need to be able to use. So first and foremost, I have a question for you. What do you think your role is in addressing challenging behavior with students? Well, the reality is you're likely not the one responsible. So if there's a student that all of a sudden runs out of a room, that doesn't mean that it's your responsibility to go and get them. So please, please, please ask your teacher if there's a student that they'd like you to kind of keep an eye on. But chances are there's already a plan for that student and a way to manage their behavior. And so you do not need to do it yourself. You want to check in with the teacher about how to manage behavior. When we think about student behavior, though, and we want to keep in mind how to deal with students, even if they're not showing really challenging behaviors, but just behaviors in general, one of the things you want to think about is that all of us have needs, and we want those needs met in order to be successful adults. So we all have needs to be understood. We want to feel safe. We want to be happy. We want to have our sensory needs met. And all of these things make us feel good about ourselves and make us feel like effective human beings. So my question to you is, what happens if some of these needs aren't met in the classroom? So what happens if I am recently here from a different country and I don't speak English very well and I'm not understood? How do you think that's going to impact my behavior? How do you think my behavior is going to be impacted if I'm not doing very well in a subject? I can't understand the assignment. How am I going to feel if I am being picked last or not even being picked if there's a game on the playground? So we really want to think about when you're thinking about why a student might be behaving the way they are, think about what their needs are. What are the things that they might need to get, and how can you think about giving those students those needs in other ways that allow them to get their needs met? So if a student isn't able to maybe have somebody play with them on the playground and they're acting out because they feel sad, they feel lonely, how can you maybe help facilitate a friendship between them and another student? If a student is having trouble understanding assignment, maybe you can talk to the teacher about what you might be able to do to support that student if needed. If a student is experiencing a difficult situation at home and they're not feeling safe in the classroom, really talk to the teacher about what are some things you can do. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. So when students are handling big emotions in the moment, again, it's not your role to manage that, but it is helpful to keep a couple things in mind when somebody is showing a big emotion. So as we talked about in emergency situations, anytime a student is really triggered or really upset, the more that you can stay calm, that's really going to help regulate that student. You want to make sure that that student gets a chance to cool down because none of us want to be confronted right away with trying to solve a problem when we're in a triggered emotional state. Please never, never call a student out for their behavior in front of everybody else, especially students that are in middle school or high school. That's just going to be really hard and difficult, and it's probably not going to make the situation any better. And then finally, if you're seeing that there's something that's coming up again and again, you want to make sure to validate that students can have this emotion. Emotions are totally fine. But how can you help that student build some skills to manage how they're expressing those emotions? And again, that's something that you can talk with the teacher about. So something else to know, and this is really related to the needs that a student may have, is that students may be not safe because they've had a traumatic event at home. They may be experiencing homelessness. They may have had a really difficult thing happen in their lives. And so if that is the case, what can you do to recognize trauma? So there is a slide information that you can look at after you view this orientation that will let you know about recognizing trauma. The signs could be physical or emotional. This is really all about connecting with that student again. If that student is feeling okay with you as a person to talk to, just listen and show you care. You want to be as safe as predictable as possible. So this really fits back to that consistency piece around communication and why we ask volunteers to commit to volunteering for at least 3 months or a semester is because you being there the same time every week really helps that student feel like they have something that they can rely on. And then finally, we talked about how can you help that student be able to regulate their emotions. That's something that you can talk with your contact about. And now a final tool in your toolbox is really thinking about the kind of language that you can use when working with students that is going to be most productive for them and really going to support them into becoming successful adults. So the first type of language is reinforcing language. And this is a kind of language that you can use when you are giving praise to a student. And so you really want to make sure that it's as concrete as possible. It's not about you. You don't want to say, I'm so proud of you, because you're not going to be there in a little bit. You want them to feel the positive affirmation that they did it. You want to, like I said, emphasize what they did, and you don't also want to say, well, why don't you do it like this other person? Because again, we don't know the life experience of the student you're working with, and so you don't want to make it seem like, well, you should be exactly the same as this other student. And then we want to find their strengths. And there's a couple of different ways you can do that. And a lot of these are really coaching questions, right? And these are the things that you want to ask that student. What made you decide to do that? What helped you do that? And then when you use those students continue to think about and learn what really works for them. Secondly is reminding language. And so this is if you are working with the student and they've been given a task to do, maybe open their folders and start working on an assignment and they're just not doing it. How can you help that student? And so, first of all, it's likely that the student already knows what they're supposed to do. So, help them remember, be as neutral as possible, try not to get your emotion into it, and be as brief as possible so you can see that student follow through with what they're doing. So you can say things like, what do we need to be doing right now? What will it look like when you've gotten your folder open? And so that will really help model again to that student what the right behavior looks like. And then finally is a type of language called redirecting language. And so this is if a student is really off task, maybe they've been reminded and they're just not doing what they need to do. How can you help get them directed back to what they need to do? And so that kind of language is really short, specific, and you may want to give them a consequence. So Maybe a kid isn't putting on their shoes and they need to go outside to the recess. You can say, uh, please put on your shoes and then we can go to recess. And so they know, right? If you want to go to recess, you need to put your shoes on. Say it's time to do this, pick up this. So again, as direct and specific as possible. Don't make it a question. Don't make any wiggle room for that student to find a loophole. So some key takeaways from student behavior. Think about the needs of that student. What might they need? And what can you do to support that student's need? How can you be that calm presence? And of course, ask for help from your AAPS contact if you're not sure, because they are there to help you and want you to support their students. And then finally, please practice. There'll be a link in this slide that you can see so you can practice the words that you can use to help students. Okay, great. Well, we have gotten through the bulk of orientation, and so now we want to get to next steps. So once you complete this orientation, as well as the quiz that is in the orientation, you get at least 50% correct, you will get a badge. And once we clear your background check, you'll get a background check cleared badge. Those two badges will tell you that you have been approved to volunteer. And then we're going to send you an email. If you are one of the people that selects your own placement, you'll get an email to let you know that you can do that now. So you may not see that email right away. And so just wait for that email and then you'll be able to go in and select an opportunity. What is our typical timeline for placements? So you complete your application, you do the onboarding that you're doing right now. Once you complete it, when we send that email to you after you've done your orientation and we've gotten your background check done, you can get placed or you can work with the coordinator in your program to get placed. Once you make that selection, you sign up, we're going to make an email introduction between you and your AAPS contact. And then from there, you are expected to work with that person to get all the details done, complete the agreement, etc. And our goal is that it'll take you between 2 weeks of getting your onboarding done, selecting your activity, to getting you placed. So where do we go from here? You got to complete your onboarding and check your badges, read that volunteer guide to make sure that you've got all the information you need to volunteer, and then get yourself placed with the agreement that you guys have between you and your AAPS contact. So with that, I invite you to take a pause, take the quiz, and if you get the questions right that you need, you will be able to get that badge and move on to selecting a placement. So thank you so much for your time. I hope that you found this useful, and we look forward to seeing you volunteer at AAPS.